Alright, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I thought this was a drumming channel, and you know what? I thought so too. But yesterday I went to see Jurassic World 2, or Jurassic Park 5, I guess it is at this point. And this is a franchise that is very close to my heart, and I thought I wanted to say a few things about it. But first, here's a bit of context. 25 years ago, Steven Spielberg pulled the rug out onto the film industry with groundbreaking visual effects, sound design, and possibly the best book-to-movie adaptation at the time. One of the reasons Jurassic Park worked so well as a coherent story, I feel, is partly because Michael Crichton, the original author of the novel, actually played a major role in writing the movie's script and helped retool the story and the characters to better fit the movie format. In other words, everyone worked really hard to make the best movie possible with the material given. And, in my opinion, they succeeded. 25 years later, and we're still talking about it. So naturally, this franchise would be treated with respect and dignity and not be exploited as a shameless cash grab, right? Well, this is Hollywood, so of course not. The sequel to Jurassic Park, The Lost World, I think was a genuinely good film, which had, in my opinion, equally impressive practical effects, even better sound design, not quite as interesting a story, and a few really stupid scenes. And then came Jurassic Park 3, and it was a mixed bag, let's just leave it at that. But after a long break, in 2015 we got Jurassic World, and you know what? I kinda liked it. It incorporated a lot of interesting ideas and concepts from especially the first novel by Michael Crichton, and it was a fun summer blockbuster. It certainly wasn't a groundbreaking story with interesting characters that challenged your worldviews, but it was an entertaining film that tried to recapture the magic of the first film, but didn't quite reach that level of epicness, for lack of a better word. Thus, the stage was set for Jurassic Park 5, which I'm just gonna call it for the duration of this video for the sake of simplicity. When I found out J.A. Bayona, the director of The Orphanage and The Impossible, would be directing this movie, I was actually pleasantly surprised. This fact, as well as the imagery and the atmosphere displayed in the trailers, implied that they might be trying to recreate the more dark and suspense-driven feel of the second movie, The Lost World. I feel that somewhere within this film there is a fantastic prehistoric horror thriller, which is what the director clearly wanted to make, but it feels like it's never allowed to release its full potential. Whether this is because of studio interference or the fact that it has to restrain itself to a PG-13 rating, I don't know. But this movie is very clearly being held back, and if retooled, this could have made for a great suspense-driven film. Now, that's not to say that I hated the film, because I didn't. There are a lot of things that this movie does very well, but sadly there are just also a lot of things that the movie does very poorly. But hey, let's start with the positives. First of all, I have to mention the cinematography. This film has so many fantastic shots, some of which evoke deep emotional responses like defeat and realization of the inevitable, but where the film's cinematography really shines is the horror sequences. The use of lighting, perspective, and disturbing imagery is just phenomenal at times. Some of the suspense-driven scenes in this film are very well crafted, and you can tell that this is where the director really shines, and this is the type of movie that he really wanted to make. Especially the beginning of this movie very clearly pays homage to the first film in terms of tone, visuals, and sound design, and there's even a little Easter egg in the first few minutes that put a smile on my face from hearing that sound. The cinematography is supported by generally great sound design, and once again especially in the horror sequences. There are a few scenes where the sound design is very underwhelming, especially the roar of the Tyrannosaurus, and generally just the sound of the dinosaurs. I don't know why they didn't reuse or at least take more inspiration from the sound design from the first two movies, since this is one of the most memorable aspects of the classic films. But generally this film sounded pretty good, and the music was also not bad. It certainly wasn't groundbreaking and phenomenal, but it was there and it served its purpose. Now, let's talk about the special effects, and particularly the practical effects, which is something I was really looking forward to seeing. Some of the effects in this movie, some of the dinosaurs, looked fantastic. I mean, holy shit, this movie actually utilizes animatronics like the classic films, and when it does, it looks great. However, there is a lot of CG in this movie because, let's face it, practical effects like animatronics have boundaries. The original Jurassic Park from 1993 expertly blended practical effects with CGI, and it worked extremely well for the most part. This movie does the same thing, and for the most part, it works very well. In most of the CG-heavy scenes, it actually feels like the dinosaurs have a physical presence in the film's universe, which is mainly achieved by great lighting and a bottomless pit of money. There are a few scenes where the computer-generated effects look laughably bad, but the more I think about the movie in general, the more I like the overall visual effects work. I'm not gonna talk too much about the acting or the characters, because, well, the acting was fine, I guess. Chris Pratt played Star-Lord, Owen Grady. Justice Smith played the worst comic release character ever. Bryce Dallas Howard was pretty good. The child actor was surprisingly not annoying. Two of my favorite performances, however, were actually from B.D. Wong, who plays Henry Wu, and Jeff Goldblum, who plays Ian Malcolm, which is really just another way of saying that he plays himself in this film. None of these characters get a lot of screen time, but they work very well within the film, and I especially enjoyed some of the lines that Jeff Goldblum's character draws between this film and the second novel. Generally, it feels like the characters take a backseat in this film, and honestly, it doesn't bother me that much. Because in the original films, they don't focus entirely on character development as much as they do on the dinosaurs. But in this movie it feels like many of the characters are just entirely one-dimensional. Now, I said there were a couple of things in this movie that just didn't work for me, and one of the things is the way exposition is handled. I mean, come on, having the bad guys just spell out their evil plans, explaining everything in great detail. What happens to show, don't tell. Some of the dialogue is generally very clunky, and I'd say around 80% of the humor just falls flat on its face. The main human villain in this movie is not very interestingly written, and when I think of great villains, I think of deep characters with complex motivations like the Joker, Darth Vader, or Hannibal Lecter. And the villain in this movie is just so lazily written that he just kind of feels like a plot device, so we have an excuse to pit the dinosaurs against the main characters. But what about this fucking thing? The Indoraptor, the crazy, creepy hybrid monster from all the trailers and promotional material. This creature is great, and J.A. Bayona honestly does a great job of making the Indoraptor menacing and terrifying. The creature feels more like a monster than it feels like a dinosaur, and given the context of the movie, that's kind of the point. However, there is one absolutely huge, fatal flaw with this creature that potentially jeopardizes the entire horror thriller aspect of this film, and that is the presentation of the creature. Every good horror director knows that the unknown is scary, and I assume that J.A. Bayona knows this too. One of the things that makes the xenomorph from the original Alien film scary is that we don't know anything about it. It's mysterious and it's terrifying. The monsters from A Quiet Place work incredibly well because they're mysterious and menacing, and they're introduced in a great way. Or the Predator from Predator. Revealing a monster to the audience should be done very carefully, otherwise you'll ruin the mystique and the horror factor. And if you show your monster just standing in the middle of a well-lit room, you eliminate the fear of the unknown. To be fair, the first scene with the Indoraptor is genuinely terrifying, partly because you don't actually get to see it in all its glory. But the next time we see it, its presentation is handled extremely poorly and not in a very terrifying way at all. I will say, however, that Bayona works very hard to make the Indoraptor scary despite the lackluster introduction. And the creature actually has a couple of very chilling scenes, some of which are very effective. So, those are my thoughts on Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. I didn't cover everything in this video, partly because I don't want to spoil anything, or at least spoil something that wasn't already spoiled in the trailers. Honestly, I feel like the trailers gave away pretty much the entire movie, and there were several really cool shots in the movie that only served as trailer fodder, and weren't expanded upon in the movie at all, and I hate that. Overall, the film was fine, I guess. It does some things very well, and it does some other things very poorly. Yet, despite all of this, I'm probably gonna see it again. I did enjoy the film, although there was a lot left to be desired, and I'd say if you like The Lost World, you're probably gonna like this one too, because they have a lot of similarities. Anyway, that's pretty much whatever I wanted to say about this film. I've never done a movie review before, but this was fun, and I'm giving this review a 10 out of 10.